Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dichotomy Podcast. This is a show dedicated to exploring the dichotomies we experience in business and in life. My name's Reid, and I'm a guy who's incredibly fascinated by understanding why we make the decisions we do in life, and ultimately, how do we lead a good life? As a business owner, I get the pressures of managing business, family, money, health can create great inner conflicts around what we actually want out of our business and our lives. This podcast is dedicated to exploring just that. I hope you enjoy it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this experiment I am calling the Dichotomy Podcast. My name is Reid, and I'm excited to bring this podcast to you and hopefully get to know each other a little bit better as time goes on. I love having deep and connected relationships with awesome human beings in my life, and if you're listening to this podcast, I think it's safe to assume you're a pretty cool human, so thanks for tuning in. But here's the thing, right? I'm also empathetic and self-aware. I get you're busy. We probably don't know each other, and by chance, you've stumbled across this podcast and decided to give it a go. So I get you need a pretty compelling reason for why you'd listen and give it your attention over everything else in your life, let alone the amazing podcasts that are out there in the world. So the question is, why listen? Put simply, the reason I've created this podcast is to help both you and I explore the dichotomies that exist in our lives. Okay, what the hell does that mean? You may have never heard of the word dichotomy before. I get it sounds a bit esoteric and abstract. Let me explain what I mean by telling you a little bit more about my background and story. While every episode of the podcast from here on out, I'll be interviewing unique and interesting people, guests like Elon Musk, Sir Richard Branson, Oprah Winfrey. I'm kidding. Actually, really just everyday human beings like you and I who have interesting stories to tell, and they may be people running businesses. They might just be people up to cool things in the world. Either way, they won't be people necessarily with world renown, but more people I've picked out because I'm fascinated to learn more about their unique life journeys. Frankly, I believe we all have an interesting story within us, and it's my job to find a way to tease that out and extract the interesting aspects of my guest personalities, their life philosophies, and share them with you, hopefully in a way that gives you greater perspective on your own life journey as well. So the simplest way I could describe a dichotomy in your life is that feeling where you're being pulled in two opposing directions over something. It may be a life decision. It may be opposing beliefs and values you hold about the way you want to live your life. Maybe it's an aspect of your marriage or your business or career. It could be your health. Whatever it is, I believe if you stop and reflect, you'll know exactly where you experience the greatest dichotomy in your own life. And the podcast is dedicated to helping you explore just that, the dichotomies you're experiencing in your life and how to better navigate them. Hopefully, it's a great journey of self-awareness and self-discovery for both you and I, but ultimately, allows you to lead a more extraordinary life. And you see, all throughout my life, I felt like I've existed at this intersection of two worlds, right? Part of me wants to lead what I call a high-octane, high-performance life. That is, go out, build businesses that have a real impact in the world, at scale, create enormous value, leave a legacy. Then, that's the driven, ambitious type A personality in me. Yet there's this other part of me that's equally strong, which is having this deep yearning for wanting to also lead what I'd call the simple life. Live in a cabin in the woods somewhere, eat off the land, read thought-provoking books, generally desire the simple things in life. Now, for me, I tend to associate the high-performance life with stress, anxiety, burnout, however, a deep sense of meaning and purpose. The simple life feels a hell of a lot more peaceful, tranquil, the path of greater contentment, but it leaves my ambition and desire for grander purpose in life wanting. And, if I was to really reflect on it, I guess one side of this equation is about exposure to the harsh elements of life. And like in the natural world, exposure to those elements is going to lead to destruction and new growth and transformation over time. The other side of the equation is more about private introspection, going deep within, not giving a fuck about the outside world and what other people think of me and what I do in the world. And, this is principally the reason why I've created this podcast and why this topic fascinates me. Right? It's really all about when you're feeling caught between these two diametrically opposed worlds, how do you find balance and master the dichotomy? Fundamentally, that question is rooted in philosophy, I suppose, but it's a philosophy on how to live well and how to lead a good life, which is a philosophy that I'm really fascinated to find answers to. And, I don't know whether it's my personality or because I'm a Gemini, perhaps I'm astrologically predisposed to question the purpose of life in this way, but I just geek out on having conversations with friends, family, peers around this existential kind of question. And, what I've discovered more and more as time's gone on, as I've talked to people, is I'm not alone, right? It seems like this topic, the challenge of finding the balance between the extremities of any given situation or path or decision in our lives can be a tricky one for a lot of people to really master. And so I decided to create this podcast really dedicated to exploring just that. Now, it's likely if you're listening to this, you're a self-aware, ambitious, driven kind of person. You could be a business owner searching for greater understanding and meaning in your own life, while also recognizing that drive and ambition left unchecked can lead to missing the point of why you got into business in the first place, probably namely to enjoy your friends, family, and life a lot more. You might be a father or a mother who feels like they've given up a part of themselves in pursuit of your kids and are feeling discontent with not finding the balance between those two important parts of yourself. Ultimately, my goal through this podcast is to help both you and I better understand the answers to really a simple but powerful question in life, which is, how do we lead a good life? So that's the synopsis. I hope it's a theme and a podcast you're intrigued to tune into. But before I go, let me tell you a bit about my life and just background for a little bit of context. Look, at the end of the day, I consider myself a fairly unremarkable dude, just another human being like you, similar fears, concerns, aspirations, desires. But if there's any one trait I feel serves me in life most, it's my curiosity. Ultimately, I'm just endlessly fascinated with how other people think about the questions I think about most. While those around me would likely say I'm a very confident, outgoing, gregarious kind of person, underneath, I feel all the usual insecurities, fear, self-doubt. You do as well. I guess that's human nature. For every bit of bravado and confidence someone exudes, there's always an equal and opposite amount of fear, uncertainty, and self-doubt. I've become a lot more comfortable acknowledging that over the years because it kind of helps to tame the dragon, so to speak. However, I think the background will just help put a bit of the present a little bit more into context. So for the last 7 years, I've been helping build a training and advisory company called Dent Global alongside my business partners, Daniel Priestley and Glenn Carlson. It's a very cool company, very proud of what we've collectively accomplished to date. We operate in 6 cities around the world, and we've been recognized by a number of publications like Inc. and Entrepreneur and Huffington Post as one of the top business growth accelerators in the world. Our clients are typically the founders of 6 to 7 figure revenue service firms, and we're most known for helping establish them as what we call key people of influence in their industry. We've had 3,000 of those people come through the Key Person of Influence Accelerator around the world, and I'm proud to say 1,000 of those are now published authors in their industry, and many of them have spoken at places like TEDx. They've won Fast Growth Awards. They've appeared in international media and generally just made enormous waves in their industry. However, when I joined Dent in its infancy 7 years ago as a uni grad, I was given a baptism by fire of selling, which is exactly simultaneously what I wanted, but was also afraid of at the same time. Ever since I was a teenager, I wanted to be an entrepreneur and run my own business. It just, for me, seemed like the most logical way to ride this exponential growth curve in life, which was something that always fascinated me and always really, really drove me. And I knew to do that, I needed to learn how to sell. right? So that kind of became my MO for the next few years. Simultaneously, I also consider myself a pretty shy, agreeable kind of guy. You know, I was never the brash, super confident and really demanding kind of nature I thought you needed to be good at selling and being an entrepreneur. Of course, I realized, later that persona for being successful as an entrepreneur or in sales is flawed, right? But, nonetheless, that was my worldview. So with that in mind, we very quickly grew Dent to become one of the fastest growing young companies in Australia, placing 63rd on the BRW Fast Starters list in 2014, 9th on the Smart Company Smart 50 list in the same year. And a big part of that could be attributed to the way we ran our sales and marketing campaigns to fill large-scale conferences on a regular basis. So at the time, we would go out and cold call hundreds of businesses to ultimately bring on board up to 150 channel partners promoting a roadshow of events across Australia. And we'd end up putting 1,000 to 1,500 people in rooms across the country every 6 months. Now, fast forward to today, I'm 30 years old. It's September 2018 when I'm launching this podcast, and I'm currently on sabbatical, traveling around the world after successfully exiting myself from the business operationally in Australia. Still very much involved in Dent as a shareholder, but not operational right now. And my eventual plan is to head to Canada and set up an office for Dent there. But in the meantime, I'm putting my full-time focus into this podcast, but most importantly, really just having fun. I've really put most of my energy into living the high-performance, kind of high-stress life I described earlier on in my 20s and been very focused on my professional world. So now I'm just taking 12 months to let the pendulum swing a little more in the other direction and enjoy some of the simple things in life. And I'm sure this journey will reveal some interesting insights into the theme of this podcast as I go as well. So look, I hope that gives some background on what the Dichotomy Podcast is all about and a little bit on my story as well. My plan is to publish a new episode twice a week for the foreseeable future. So these will typically be long-form interviews ranging anywhere from 60 minutes to 2 hours. And my objective with all of them is to get into the real, raw, kind of authentic conversation that reveals the inner workings of someone's life and uncovers their own life dichotomies and how they've navigated them, so you and I can learn the lessons from their experience as well. The topics will be wide-ranging, from health to wealth, philosophy, money, business, adventure, lifestyle, those kind of things. I essentially want to uncover my guest's worldview, and deconstruct how they think about their world and their place in it. I am new to the podcasting arena, so all I ask is you bear with me. Probably a bit nervous doing this, at least for the first half a dozen to dozen episodes, so it's likely to be a little bit unwieldy for the first few as I find my rhythm and flow. But as they go, I'm really confident I'll get better at interviewing people and just knowing the right questions to ask to uncover the gold and the wisdom in their stories for both you, my listeners, and I as well. So a quick postscript in explaining the first 20 episodes I recorded of the Dichotomy Podcast. Like anything new, this was a process of discovery for me to really understand what this show was about and the true intent of what I was trying to uncover in interviewing my guests. And you see, what I learned in the first 20, let's call them pilot episodes, was that while we explored my guest dichotomies, often I could have gone deeper into any one of them. Now, I've learned my goal isn't to try and resolve the dichotomies of my guests' lives. It's merely to expose them for what they are. And in exposing them, both you, my listeners, and my guests gain a deeper and richer understanding of the motivations and drivers in our own lives. So if in some of these episodes I didn't fully go there, I appreciate your patience as you stick with me on this journey as the podcast evolves. What I've learnt has been invaluable, and I can't wait to bring the next series of episodes to you with even more depth and insight. So now, without further ado, let's get into the show. Hey, so thanks for listening to that first explainer episode. I hope that gives a bit of context on my spirit of intent with the Dichotomy Podcast. I've got no idea where this is going to go. There's no commercial agenda to this at this point in time, other than to really explore a topic that I'm deeply curious and fascinated about. So I hope you really enjoy it. And until next time, thanks again for listening. Hey, so I wanted to share an update since I first recorded this explainer episode. Over the last 6 months, I've had a blast traveling around the world on sabbatical. I've had mind-altering experiences at places like Burning Man and the Nevada desert. I've hiked some of the most well-known treks in South America, and I've gone deep into the Amazon jungle to explore things like plant medicines, and I've also spent time in solitude in the Finnish countryside. It's been incredible. And now in early 2019, my sabbatical has come to a close, and I'm really excited to announce I'll be launching a chapter for my company Dent Global in Toronto, Canada in 2019. As I shared in this episode, for the last 8 years, my business partners and I have been building an award-winning business growth accelerator company called Dent, which has been operating in the UK, USA, Singapore, and Australia. To date, we've worked with over 3,000 established entrepreneurs fairly intensively through our flagship 12-month accelerator program called the Key Person of Influence Accelerator. Some other exciting news is I've also revised and will be co-authoring a Canadian edition of the Key Person of Influence book. My business partner Daniel first published this book in 2010, and since then more than 100,000 entrepreneurs around the world have taken up a copy of the book. With the launch into Canada, we decided that now would be a good time to do a revised edition of the book. We've updated the content significantly with new stories and local Canadian case studies of people who are establishing themselves as visible, valuable, and well-connected key people of influence in their industry. As I mentioned just a minute ago, there is no commercial agenda to the Dichotomy Podcast other than to explore a topic I'm deeply curious about and really feel is an expression of who I am, my personality, and just what I love to talk about. However, if you want to connect with me personally and what I'm up to, then head on over to mikejamesreid.com. That's REID.com. Whether you want to head to our website for Dent, grab a copy of the revised edition of the KPI book, or join our online community of entrepreneurs who are making a dent in the universe, it's all there. That's the place to go. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Dichotomy Podcast.